It was a whim. All right, well, this will be a blank. We don't have a marker. So, emptiness. Yeah, there is that. There is that indeed. Okay. Ooh, feel a little chill. Oh. I don't know. You guys feel like you can get closer if you want. And that may be an empty seat. Oh, no, there's Wendy. Okay. Come on in. Oh, I think there's room. And this is...
What is the proper way to bow in Buddhism?
Which kind of bowing?
Just to so I come into the front door and what I know is that you bow 3 times, right, for the Bodhi, the Dharma, and the Sangha. But
You're doing it wrong. No.
Show me the ways.
Well, and different sanghas do it differently, but our practice is you come in the door with, step in with, I believe, your left foot. It's either that or the right foot. I'm going to go with, let me just do it. Let me just let my body remember. Right foot, bow. And that's it. And then, we bow if we enter into the kind of mini zendo, we bow to Manjushri over there. We don't, some sanghas, people bow on their way out. We don't do that in this sangha. What is form? What is form? I mean, it's actually a good question, and in some ways a relevant question. But speaking of form, let's begin with names. And just remember, so we're doing pronouns. So after I say my name and my pronouns, and we all repeat my name and my pronouns, and we go around. Okay. This is not what we do in other gatherings, but I am trying to make this stick. But we'll see. Things change slowly. So let's start with names. Myobun, she, her.
Myobun, she, her. Micah, he, him.
Micah, he, him.
Wendy, she, her.
Wendy, she, her.
Emma, she, her.
Emma, she, her.
Myozin, she, her.
Myozin, she, her.
Andy, he, him.
Andy, he, him.
Dylan, he, him.
Dylan, he, him. Welcome, everyone. So form, that question of form and the forms that we do of practice and the ways in which we comport our bodies, the way we move our bodies. This is very much a question of Shila, of the Paramita we'll be talking about today. So it's relevant very much to think about, what is that? What is that about? Why do we even worry about that? And certainly American culture is full of a healthy, I think, to some extent, disregard for forms and ceremonies. That's part of a Protestant heritage, insofar as our country has been imbued with that spirit of Protestantism, despite what, indigenous religions were here, or the religions of different immigrants. We're very much a Protestant nation that comes into its sense of meaning as signs and ceremonies and rituals just point to something that's real. And the kind of rituals of religious ceremony, particularly, this is very much the Protestant critique of Catholicism back in, the 16th century and moving forward. That's just theater, right? That's just theater. What those Pope worshiping folks do, that's just theater, right? My response to that is, theater's pretty fucking awesome. Like the way in which theater, just theater, creates moments and holds our heart and opens us up, that actually is pretty miraculous. So if religion is just theater, great, because theater is also just religion. So I thought one thing, I mean, we're surrounded. I don't know how many folks were, I was at this a mindfulness teaching retreat this weekend, so I wasn't at Sagaki, but I'm wondering, who was at, you were at Sagaki, of course. Yeah, how was it? I mean, just, yeah, because we talked about it a little bit last week, you and I, Andy. Yeah.
It was interesting. I think I messed up because I was worried about that. Because the first time we went to the altar, is that right? We were just spoke about how I wasn't sure how many times to bow, that and then put the little piece of paper there. But I also did the incense, but I guess we were supposed to do that for the second time. I don't know. Anyway, I think it.
Because of you, the hungry ghosts, they starved. You did not feed them. No, but so there was.
It was a good time reflection.
Yeah.
I had a hard time figuring out the chanting.
Yeah.
How many times?
Yeah. So.
But again, it was.
Yeah. That's one of the things about forms that is, I mean, everything has light and shadow, right? I mean, this is part of, actually what it is to be alive, that, our understanding of the world is partial. There's actually I keep bringing the Diamond Sutra and I keep saying we might get to the Diamond Sutra. There's some teachings in here, but one of the teachings in the Diamond Sutra that I'm really fond of, that Ejo first got me, Hojo-san first got me thinking about, is the teaching of the 5 mystic eyes, the 5 eyes. That the Buddha has 5 eyes, and one of the Buddha's eyes, the first eye, is the physical eye, and that's actually. If you think about eye as just all of our sensory apparatus that allows us to take in the world, it's always partial, right? We're always in positionality. One of the reasons that we say our pronouns is to claim our positionality, how we face the world as gendered beings, right? We're always positional. That means that everything that we know and understand, there's what we see, what we understand, what we grasp, and because we're finite beings who are always, by definition, in a dharma position, I think Hojo-san's been talking about this in the Genja Koan class, it's going to be limited, right? So there will always be the shadow of what we don't fully grasp in whatever we do grasp. And one of the shadow side of ritual, the stuff that's in the dark about ritual, the stuff that's not fully kind of processed in the way we humans hold rituals, that it creates insides and outsides. So they're the people who know the ritual and the people who don't know the ritual. And that's a shadow aspect of it, right? Which is we never get rid of the shadowy parts of our understanding, but we can sometimes expand our awareness of what's in the shadow. So just acknowledging that forms and the magic of form, the magic of theater, it carries that shadow. So it's like, you did it wrong. Sorry. No, it does that. Emma, what was your experience of, this wasn't your first Sagaki. You've been to Sagaki a few times now. Yeah.
A little over a year and a half old Buddhist. You're a baby.
You're a baby Buddha.
Baby Buddhist. I really felt like this. I'm really happy to hear us talking about it through the perspective of forms. Because I was Jisha.
Oh, holy cow.
Yeah, holy cow, dude.
Yeah, Jisha. So the Jisha is the attendant to the officiant, to the priest, right? So the idea with the Jisha is that Hojo-san, you anticipate everything. He's not, if he reaches back behind him, it's there. Yeah.
The pillow is there, exactly.
Yeah.
Trying to prepared. Yeah, and that's my first, I'm still at the point in my training here where like cooking breakfast is crushingly terrifying. Ringing the bell is crushingly terrifying.
Myobun is nodding. Because what's what's terrifying? Let's just, again, I mean, everything that we're saying about form, we're talking a little bit about Shila too, about the paramita of discipline, or sometimes it's translated as conduct, how we comport ourselves, how we do it. So what's crushingly terrifying?
I think for me is presses me right up against my. This sounds really harsh, and at some places, sometimes it comes from a really harsh place, and right now it doesn't feel like it's coming from that same sort of place of sharpness and hatred. But it presses me right up against my like consistent inattentiveness in a way that I think is potent and necessary. And also, it presses me up against my hatred for my consistent inattentiveness.
Okay, that's really important. What you just said, I think you touched on something. Handouts. This is getting a little bit ahead of what I wanted us to grapple with. So we'll back up. But so second and third page of the handout. It's absurd how much I hand out to you guys, but just bear with. There's more. And the printer. Oh, hold on. Some of them are more muddy than others. Okay, there we go. Phew, got there. So, in the Noble Truth class, I talked about this wheel of life. Samsara, this is something that comes up in Rafe Martin's discussion of Shila. And by the way, this is this thing about Sanskrit, and pretend that I am writing on the whiteboard. So that S-I-L-A, that S is pronounced S-H. So sometimes you'll see Sanskrit words where it's S-H. Sometimes they'll just be an S, and it'll be confusing. And I don't speak Sanskrit, but I've been around enough Buddhists to know this thing about the Sanskrit spelling. Or like the word bodhicitta, which sometimes you'll see chitta spelled C-H, or sometimes you'll just see it spelled with a C. It's because this is like the Englishization of the Sanskrit word. So sometimes people say sila, but my understanding is it's pronounced shila. Okay? And the word shila literally, again, means something like, it's often translated as ethics or morality, but it really means more like just discipline and form, conduct. How you do it and how you hold yourself to the way you're supposed to do it, how we create those boundaries for our actions. So samsara, Rafe Martin says in the chapter on Shila, it just means wandering. So this idea of our samsaric existence is, this way in which we're just wandering, but our wandering kind of reliably goes in these circles where we think we're moving forward, getting ahead, getting what we want, but we end up back in the same place, right? And one expression of that is this image of samsaric existence, of the 6 realms of existence, with the greed, hatred, and delusion, the pig, the rooster, and the snake at the center, those 3 poisons, the way we grab onto things, the way we push things away, and the way we really miss who we are, that delusion, that ignorance, is at the center of the wheel. But at the outermost edge of the wheel is another expression of samsara, which is the 12 links of dependent origination, which is Buddhist psychology. Like, how is it that we keep moment by moment replicating the way we are? It's this fundamental irony of human suffering, not just human, sentient being suffering, dukkha. It's this fundamental irony that, the problem, the cause of dukkha is our greed and hatred. Why? because we grab onto things, if you're taking the Genja Koan class, flowers fall, although we love them, weeds flourish, although we hate them. We grab onto things that we want, they die, they fade away, they don't last, our desire for them doesn't last, or we push things away that we don't like, and our pushing away isn't successful. The world is impermanent, everything is changing, and yet the great irony of samsara is that despite the fact that everything's changing, nothing ever freaking changes, right? We don't get anywhere. Things just keep replicating. Okay, so why am I bringing this up now? That 12 link of dependent origination, which is the Buddhist psychological explanation, basically of how moment by moment, lifetime by lifetime, epoch by epoch, we keep recreating the same scenarios. On this link here, which is also replicated here, the problem spot isn't that we don't like things or that we do like things. The problem spot is this grasping, this tanha, this moment that comes after we've reacted to the world and said, I like this or I don't like it. But it's that grasping. So Emma, when you're saying, pushing up against my own inattentiveness, no, it's pushing up against my hatred of that stickiness to this unpleasant fact about ourselves. It's not just, I don't like, it's like, ugh, that kind of, friction that somehow gets us revved up. It becomes a kind of motor in our lives. I think the easiest way to understand it is the mechanism of desire. That when desire starts to wane, we want to rev it up. We want to keep feeling that. And that's where things become that's the motor. That's the moment. Yeah, you look like you're going to say something. Yeah.
I wonder about, I like the phrasing that's the motor. When you think about that, there's like a twin sister to that hatred that I think is also the fuel for my vow. Or uncovering that it is the same, it's the furiousness of my vow that I feel I don't feel content with being distracted from the world anymore. And that is either the same being between being of that hatred, and it's a I think I like what you're saying, that it's the reaction to it. Like, it's either the grabbing onto it, or it's their stickiness, it's the reaction.
Yeah.
But what are your reflections on that?
Well, vow, so one of the ways, again, whiteboard that I am not able to use. One of the ways to think about our work with these 6 ideals, these 6 attitudes of the Bodhisattva is to think that they actually teach us a little bit about how vow arises and how we nurture it, and even what vow is. And there's an order that we study, that one commonly studies the paramitas, even though, that last week I showed that 5-pointed star where prajna, wisdom, the 6th paramita is kind of at the center. We're kind of circumambulating, we're walking around, like in the Sagaki ceremony, we're walking around, we're circling around the truth of prajna. What is the truth of prajna? Prajna just means wisdom, but when we talk about this wisdom at the heart of Buddhism, we're actually talking about the heart. We're talking about the wise and awakened heart that we touch into, that's beating in each of our chests, that's beating in all the dharmas, all creation, all the stuff. And we're kind of walking around it. So there's this order. You start with talking about generosity, typically. The next thing you talk about is discipline, is shila, right? Then you tend to talk about kshanti, patience. Then virya, which is vigor or zeal, fire, that fire in your gut. And then you talk about dhyana or meditation. And then you talk about prajna. And that kind of movement around that wheel of the Dharma, as we follow it, it kind of helps us see how, if this is the wheel of samsara, the way that we moment by moment replicate the same old shit again and again and again, that is another kind of wheel, the wheel of the Dharma, that helps us think, okay, how do I practice my way through this? So I think we're going to come back to your twin if we don't get there in a few minutes, bring this back, okay? I want to talk a little bit more. We were just finishing up talking about dana, about generosity, about giving and receiving at the end of our work last week. And a couple of you weren't there, so it's not, even if we repeat ourselves, that's okay. And there's always more to say about generosity. And just this reminder, we won't dive into it, but the Sagaki ceremony is fundamentally a ritual enactment of whatever dana is, whatever it means to give and receive. It's a ritual enactment of the perfection of that, the ideal of it. All right, so we read this tale of the starving tigress, and then I sent you guys a link to a YouTube video, which you may not have seen. I'll send it again, about Kate and Pippin. I don't know if anyone watched that, or you may have seen it before, about the Great Dane and the fawn. One of these cute animal stories. And I am wondering, because I spend a little bit of time watching cute animal videos, I am wondering why we love those things. And if you don't watch cute animal videos, get out! No. Substitute whatever it is that you watch that's like, why do we, this one, I don't know if you guys saw it, but it's, this fawn was abandoned. We don't know. The mother was probably killed. And she came in. This is like a true story, and there's lots and lots of YouTube videos. And there's a channel called Kate and Pip, I think. You can, or a website. It's one of those things, right? That the internet gives us, the algorithm delivers, right? So this fawn basically got adopted by this Great Dane. And they became the best of friends. At first, the fawn is like trying to suckle on the Great Dane, and Great Dane's just letting it. But then as the fawn grows up, goes into the wild, but always comes back. And I don't know, the videos ended about 8 years ago, so I have no idea what's happened now. But for, several years that this was chronicled on the World Wide Web, this fawn and this Great Dane, they love each other, right? Why do those stories... Why do they touch us?
If they didn't touch us, I'd be scared.
Okay. Well, say more.
Well, I started working in an elementary school this year, and mostly worked in middle schools, which is a beast. And there's these sweet cute little kids, and then there's also these rampaging kids that destroy my library. And so I go between, sweet little fawn, to lion that's destroying things. And I just feel like I'm doing the wheel every day. But I'm really trying to make sure that I look at the cute little faces of the kids, because that helps me soften before I deal with the kid that's rampaging the library. So it helps me sort of get back to my softness, because if not, I'm just in the hardness and why are you destroying the library?
So what is that softness, Myobun?
A feeling of, there is love in the world, and we do look out for each other, and that differences can meet and all those.
And in that moment, where is the love that's in the world?
Coming from me.
Yeah.
I can get in touch with it. I guess it's out there, it's there, and I can commune with it.
And you feel it in your heart.
Yeah.
You touch this softness in yourself. And then, you see it in, cute, what cute is. There's a tarot artist named, I don't think this is her actual name, Zara Kittenchops. And her tag for her tarot deck, which is called the Playful Heart Tarot, is cuteness is my sacred space. Yeah. I mean, I think there's a lot of that spirit in the way that your heart gets touched, that in that cuteness, which, what? I mean, what is it? Is it that we're feeling maternal protective? Is it that we're feeling our own child inside? Is it that we're feeling the tenderness of life? Is it all those things at once? Now, the story of Kate and Pippin, Kate's the Great Dane, Pippin's the deer, I think activates a slightly, a nuanced version of that, because you've got like a predator and a prey. That genre of internet stories, it's like, how could it be that, this lion is friends with this little bird, or, where it's just like, it's absurd, right? Because these are animals that are supposed to eat each other. And they don't, right? There's a nuance there that takes us, I think, even closer to what's at stake with this softness. And I was looking at the comments on the YouTube page. Someone wrote, "This is so sweet, brings tears to my eyes. Why would anyone dislike this?" Because I guess there were some thumbs down. Like, what's wrong with you? And then, "Call me a big wuss, but I have tears in my eyes." That tears, that common thing of tears. "Good, it's not just me," writes someone in response to that. "My heart can't take any more of this beautiful thing." That was an interesting comment. What's that? And the tears, what's that? That response. My heart can't take any more of this beautiful thing. What is that? You're smiling.
I mean, I have a shell, right? And
Yeah.
like, I don't want to totally break down. Just a few tears are good.
Right.
I think I can connect with it on some level.
Yeah.
It's just, what's going on with your life, and all of a sudden tears,
Yeah.
It's like, whoa.
And yet we, I mean, in a certain mood, I hope I'm not like too much information here, but in a certain mood, we seek out those kinds of tears, right? That kind of softening. We seek out that feeling, that ache of, I don't think I can take, this is so sweet, I can't take anymore. I think my heart's going to break. There's something there. It's like, well, what, I like how you put it, Myobun, like the shell, that we kind of need, we think, we need this shell to maneuver through the world. We don't quite know how to maneuver through the world in a space of total tenderness. We're not real good at that. That, just put a pin in that. That might be one of the reasons we need Shila. We need discipline. We need form to help us figure out how we can navigate the world without the shell of a sense that we are a self that's separate. Predator, prey. Know your place, right? Discipline, Shila, might be a way that we have a shape to hold that tender heart. There was one thing, I thought this was brilliant. Someone wrote, "Animals are amazing creatures." And the comment to that was, "Things are amazing stuff." I like that. It's like, yes, everything is amazing. I was like, you little bodhisattva on YouTube. That's fantastic. And this is, this recognizing of the tender heart, of our own tender heart that we see reflected in the world. And this, not just that I have a tender heart, but it's like, this isn't just my tender heart. In fact, I would say the reason that it feels like I can't take too much of this is because we recognize it isn't mine. That doesn't mean it's not mine. It's just not whatever I think mine is, whatever I think that construct, this is mine, that's wrong. There's a touching into the sense that this tender heart that's in me, like, oh, I have such sweetness inside. It's like that feeling is, right, it's not me. It's the tender heart that we all share. And this comes back to the Jataka tale, right, from last week. I just so happen to have a quote from that tale at the top of the page. Would someone read that Jataka tale of the tigress? This is the Bodhisattva speaking. First, he's speaking to his assistant, and then the italics are him speaking to himself a little bit later in the tale. Can someone read that for us?
Those are not simply the roars of a hungry tiger. They are the roars of a starving one. She may be driven to eat her own cubs if she doesn't have enough food soon. The karma arising from that will be terrible. Mind is vast, totally empty, and cannot be found. My deepest wish has ever been to save sentient beings. To fail to act when there is opportunity would be a cause for regret. He removed his robe and hung it on a branch of a tree.
Thank you. So, the story, right? There's, the Buddha before he's a Buddha, many lifetimes ago. He's a monk, and he's off with an assistant, and he sees this hungry tigress who is emaciated. And she's not just hungry, she's driven to the extremes of starvation, and she's starting to look hungrily, eagerly at her own cubs, right? So we talked about this a little bit last week at the end of our session. If this were just about, I want to save her from dying, this wouldn't be a story that takes us to the very pith of what giving and receiving are all about. So when we talk about perfection, what does it mean to talk about the perfection of generosity? The paramita, what does that word mean? Well, paramita means both what transcends and is sublime, but it also means something like what goes beyond. And in going beyond in this way that's almost impossible to imagine, and yet here it is in this story, we get to the pith, to the very heart of what all giving and receiving is at its core, at its spirit. So if this were just about how do I feed the hungry tigers? I started a wildlife refuge that feeds the hungry tigers. That would be a very generous thing to do. But this story is taking us one step beyond that. He's not just trying to save her life. Right? What does this mean when he says the karma arising from that will be terrible? It's not just that she'll die if she doesn't eat. It's not just that her cubs will die if she eats them. You guys are nodding. What?
Is it the prime directive?
Is it the prime directive? Everything is the prime directive. You want to unpack that a little bit?
Well, about interference? Is it about interference?
Well, what is it? What? Being an ecological
Collapse.
It would be an ecological collapse. I think it's all those things. It's, how I interpret this is, he's not trying to save her life. He's trying to save her soul. We don't speak about souls in Buddhism. That's a very Christian way to put it. But I think that's what's at stake. It's he's not trying to keep her alive. That would be worthy to try to figure out, how do I save her? How does he save her? He gives up his life for her. So that would be great, to give up my life to save somebody's life. But we all die. That's not what makes this tale a tale that takes us to the very heart of giving. It's his recognition that she's a Buddha too. She's a being of awakening too. And if she eats her cubs, that Buddha heart in her becomes so obscured. It's hard to even imagine how you come back from that. The degradations that a being can go through, right? It's like, I think about this with Russia and Ukraine. I hope this isn't I don't want to distract us with like a political issue that we all might not be on the same page with, but this has been a powerful teaching for me, realizing that on the one, like my heart goes out to the Ukrainians, but then I also think about the Russian soldiers and how degraded and debased they are becoming in this theater of war. And I think, where my heart aches is thinking about, like, how does Russian society, I mean, there's lots of ways that my heart aches here, but one of the ways is like, how does the average Russian come back from this? And I think about this from my perspective as being the daughter of German Jewish refugees. And I think, yeah, it sucked to be a Jew in the 30s, really sucked. But what if you're a German in the 30s? And so that sense of what's at stake here is not just a life, because life keeps going. That's what the wheel of samsara is all about. Life will just keep doing life. This is about that tender heart. Does that seem right? Does that make sense? And seeing in this tigress the truth of that tender heart, that wise, awakened heart, that soft spot. That thing that you want to protect in the little kids, that you want to preserve their innocence, right? Innocence is such a silly word. It's not their innocence. We want to preserve their grace, their perfection, right? So, what's fascinating to me is that in this moment, what arises for him is vow, right? My deepest wish has been to save all sentient beings. That what awakens in that moment is something other than the calculus of life, than the calculus of how do we stay alive. What arises is something else. To fail to act when there is opportunity would only be a cause for regret. What's that? What is that about? What does that mean to you guys? And have you ever had a moment in your lives that feels like that, where you're like, something is activated here that's not just the average calculus of pain and suffering and escaping from that and being prompted. There's some nodding here. There's some furrowing of brows. What do you think? What is that about? To fail to act would only be cause for regret.
Before moving here, I made the decision to quit my job, and I ended my lease early in 3 months at the monastery up in Buddha. And the feeling behind that was really it feels really close to this. It was like I had no choice. And by any means that I've tried to explain it to my friends, my coworkers, except for my friends here.
Right. Your wacky Buddhist friends.
Exactly. Buddhist boyfriend.
Terrible influence.
Terrible influence. We all know. Yeah, it's it just sounded like a totally foolish, stupid thing. And it made no sense to anybody. It made no sense to me. It was beyond the calculus of planning my life to fail to do this now.
Okay. Yeah. Was that, Micah, is that resonating with you?
Yeah, it was. I mean, I guess I felt that in a lot of different situations in my life where I just kind of had to do it, even if it was at people didn't get the things that I did in a similar context.
Yeah.
Moving across the world.
Yeah.
Years.
Yeah. Yeah. So the sense that there's something here that is impelling me to act. This idea of vow, Okay, that there's, and we'll look at a quote in a minute that's really relevant for this. This idea of vow arising as there's a way to live life that makes sense. That's all about samsara, because it's all about living and dying and, you know, taking care of yourself, and all about the shell that we have to protect to keep this organism alive. And then there's something else. It's like, okay, why I put that last, in making the quote, that very last line in, he removed his robe and hung it on a branch of a tree, is because at that point, there's a movement that is all about discipline. Like, because what the Bodhisattva does next is he dives over the cliff to kill himself, to give his body to the starving tigress. Like, that is not something that you just do, right? And yet that moment of resolution that comes in the recognition of the vow, and you hang up the robe and it's like, boom, this is discipline. And this is discipline in a very basic level, right? So I put this cartoon, the mind-body problem, like, get up, move, right? Yeah, it's a joke, guys.
Well, why is it, in this case, why is it discipline on a very basic level?
Well, okay, that on some level, like, I mean, like what we think of as discipline, which is like, get up off your ass. You don't want to go out in the rain and go for a walk, but you got to do it because you said you're going to go for a walk. It's like, at a very basic level, doing something that your body doesn't want to do because it's not, right? I mean, at a very basic level, maybe basic is not quite the right word, at a very, like, just everyday level, what we think of as discipline, right? Like all the stuff you do that you don't really want to do, but you do because you have decided that you should do it. I mean, on any given day, there's a bunch of stuff that we all do. I don't care how much of a like Netflix watching bonbon sitting on the couch person you are, but chances are if you're sitting here on a Tuesday evening, you're not so much of that person anyway. You know, everyone does stuff they don't want to do. Like even in COVID, getting out of bed to get on Zoom. You might not get dressed, but, right? So we all do stuff that, and that's just, I mean, just that very everyday sense of discipline. Like remember, all of the paramitas, we can investigate them at a, you know, at a kind of everyday level. Like this is what this Dogen quote that I handed out on our first day, I think. And we haven't ever really talked about it, but Dogen, the 13th century ancestor who founded our temple lineage in Japan, you know, he says, in principle, although nothing is truly one's own, this does not prevent us from giving. So he points to the way in which, you know, at its core, at the prajna core, at the pith of giving and receiving, this heart isn't mine, this life isn't mine, it's life. We all share it. We're all intertwined. And yet, even so, you can go ahead and give stuff. You can give little things, you can give big things, right? You can give your life, you can give $5 to some stranger on the street. We can do this. We have a sense of, at a very everyday level, of what all of these things are. The thing that's transformative is when we start to practice and try to get to the pith. Like, well, what's really at stake here with giving and receiving? What does it really mean to recognize that nothing is really mine? And because of that, I am always giving and receiving, which means that starving tigress is also me. Her heart is my heart. Same with discipline. On a very everyday level, we're all doing stuff that we don't want to do. We're all like this, get up! No. Like we all do that. We encounter this bodhisattva activity at a very basic level. But at its heart, what is it? At its heart, what is that impulse? Not impulse. What is that activity? So I was thinking about this, and I was thinking, so is this just willpower? What we mean by willpower? And here are a couple quotes about willpower. When the going gets tough, the tough get going. What does that mean? What does that mean? What does that mean actually? When the going gets tough, the tough get going. Is it like a definition of willpower? Like, or what does it mean? I mean, look, this is not a trick question. I'm actually like, what does that mean?
I think it just means like, this is like you're just talking basics, and I'm just going to frame it in my
Yeah, yeah.
that, you know, I like to exercise. I like to go to the gym.
Yeah.
Unfortunately for me, with my new job, I have to wake up at 5 in the morning to do it.
Yeah.
And so every day my alarm clock goes off, and I'm like, shit.
Yeah.
Here we go. You know, and it is a struggle to leave the house.
Yeah.
I want to just lay in bed for another hour.
Right. Yeah. And yeah, exactly. So like, you know, okay, it's tough, but you're tougher than that.
Yeah. I don't know if I'd put it and frame it in that context, but yes.
Right. Right. But is that like there's something here that is, I mean, this is a way that we often think about discipline. It's mind versus body. Like the body just wants to, but the mind's like, no, you made a commitment. Myobun, get the hell out of bed and get on your cushion, right? The drill sergeant, that is my mind, counteracting the lazy lard ass that is my body, right? Okay. I'm swearing a lot tonight. I don't know. I don't know why. And yet, you can perhaps guess where I'm going. That can't quite be right, because the second quote, which is all over the internet, if you Google quotes on willpower, you get the second quote. If freedom is short of weapons, we must compensate with willpower. So, you know, if we don't have the tools we need to pursue freedom, we must use our will. Do you know who said that quote? Adolf Hitler. Yeah, bingo, 1925. So there might be a flaw with the image of this kind of notion of the discipline we're talking about, this perfection, this expression of prajna as mind over matter, of our will driving forward. There may be a problem with that. And actually getting to the heart of what that problem is super important, just like we were trying to get to the heart of what dana is. Trying to think what to do next. Let's talk about the Jataka tale. And I don't know if people had a chance to read it. I brought, of course, because I'm me, I made copies of a couple of passages from it for us to look at. Did people have a chance to glance at it? So it's tricky. So the basic story, well, we can read so this couple of paragraphs on the left side of the page, or the beginning of the story. And remember, these Jataka tales, these are tales that are the story of the Buddha before he was the Buddha, when he was just a bodhisattva, just another bum on the bus, you know, trying to make his way home. So, you know, centuries and centuries and kalpas and kalpas and kalpas of different lives, where he basically enacts all the different ways that a being can be. And we start to see how all of these lives are expressions of prajna, of the truth of our wise and awakened heart. And these tales have been used as teaching tools for getting to that pith of what a bodhisattva is, the pith of what the paramitas are. So the gentle heart tale, gentle heart is the name of the queen in the tale, is a tale that's used to teach about Shila, about discipline. So, long ago, when Brahmadatta reigned in Benares, the bodhisattva was born into a Brahmin family in the Kasi country. His youth and childhood were happy, and yet, when he was grown and had finished his education, he saw little profit in the ways of the world and chose instead to take the hermit's path. So this lifetime of the bodhisattva is not unlike the lifetime of Siddhartha before he woke up and became the Buddha, but it takes a turn that's important. Returning to the Himalayas, he built a hut and led a simple solitary life, devoting himself to meditation. Making a strong effort, he soon attained the selfless knowledge of prajna, of the interweaving of all things, right? The emptiness that is all things interconnected. And he entered the awakened life. There he lived up on the peaks, absorbed in bliss. One day, because he's mortal, he ran out of salt, vinegar, and other staples. Piling his tangled hair up in a knot on his head, he straightened his bark clothes, put an antelope skin over his shoulder, and thus properly attired, headed down the mountain to Benares to gather alms. And what happens there is he encounters the king and the queen, and they're so enraptured by his ascetic ways. They're like, teach us, we need to learn the Buddha Dharma. And he ends up living a very nice life as, an abbot in a nice temple supported by the Sangha. He becomes a teacher. He spends 16 years teaching. And then one day, and this is the part of the tale that's like, oh God, does every religion have to have a version of this? He sees the queen naked and he is inflamed with lust. And now he can only think about the queen, Gentle Heart. And I think the fact that her name is Gentle Heart is really important. And he's just like, oh, gotta have her, gotta have her, gotta have her. So he's grasping, right? He's in that state, that sticky state of desire, right? And to his credit, his immense credit, when he encounters the king, he sort of hides out in his room, like he's just like, he's not going to act on his lust, but he doesn't know what to do, and he hides out in his room, and the king comes and finds him, and when he encounters the king says, what's going on? And to his great credit, he says, I saw your wife naked, and I've been inflamed with lust ever since. And the king says, and this is how we know we're dealing with a fairy tale, he says, well, you are a wise and wonderful man, you can have her. And then he goes to his wife, and this is also how we know we're in a fairy tale. He says, I'm going to give you to the monk, can you help me? We need to save him. I trust you completely, which is kind of an amazing feature of the story. And not so much like the patriarchy that you'd expect it to be. It's like, I trust you completely, but we need to save him from this lust. And she's like, okay. And so he says to the Bodhisattva, here's my wife, she's now yours. I absolve her of any bind to me, and she now can be yours. And so he's like, yes, takes her to his hut, and she says, your hut, we kind of need, I can't really live here. Let's go to, the ancient version of IKEA and get some furniture and set it up and clean it up. And he basically, she keeps him doing these tasks to make the house suitable for her. So, he'll finish something. She says, well, we need a door. He does that. And she's like, well, we need a place for the animals because we're going to have animals so that we can have food. And we're going to, and he does all this. And he's like, yeah, okay, what did you say? Because, he's just, this is like the best and most exquisite foreplay ever, right? Like just the deferral of desire. Keep it going, keep it going, keep it going, keep that desire going, which is super interesting, right? And then this last, finally he finishes all of the tales, and he's on the cusp of satisfying that desire with Gentle Heart. Shyly, he led her to their home. She smiled as she looked over the exterior, good walls, roof, animal pen, door. She stepped inside. It's lovely, she said, looking around. Truly perfect. You've done a great job. Now, come with me. Closing the door, she took the ascetic by the hand and led him to the bed. They sat down facing each other. She put her hands on his broad shoulders and could feel his heart pounding wildly. She reached up, took hold of his beard, drew his face close to hers, looked him in the eyes, and said with surprising force, you are a good man. And you are a holy man, a sage. Have you forgotten yourself? And just like that, in a flash, he saw it all, how he'd lost his awareness and gotten lost in a little heavenly dream, saw how his mind had been overcome, his practice long since flown away. He was startled and ashamed, shocked really, to see how his desire had so quickly inflamed and then dominated his mind. And he saw, too, how unprepared and raw he still was, how unready yet to give guidance to others, how immature still in his embodiment of the way. And then he remembered his own deep vows. With that, he regained his underlying determination to awaken fully and be of help to all beings who face loss and illness, aging and death without a guide, a bridge, or raft. He saw, too, that he stood poised on the edge of a knife and that, thus far at least, no real harm had yet been done. Gentle Heart is not mine, he thought. She is the king's wife, the queen, and has been both wise and kind. And so has the king. To go farther now would begin the betrayal. this is where immortality would start. So, this is the story to illustrate discipline. What do you make of it?
This story really helped me this week.
Did it?
Yeah, because I feel like every day I've been going in and it's really hard. And I'm like, I want to have a gentle heart today. Come out.
Yeah.
I don't really feel like I have a gentle heart. And so just feeling
Yes.
like, this is
What does that
this is the
mean?
thing of it.
What does that
like
mean?
Day by day, you just come at it again and you give it another try. And
Yeah.
he's like, I'm not there yet. I need to keep trying.
Yeah, what does it mean, I want to have a gentle heart? Like, how do you understand her role in the story?
Well,
I think you're...
I think about her role in the story different than I'm thinking about myself.
Okay.
But in her role in the story, I mean, she's kind of the wise one, right?
She is.
Yeah.
She is. And that seems to be really, like these stories, like dreams, there are the different players, but like, they say about dreams, because these are dreams. I was saying last week, that this bodhisattva path is a path of dreams, because, if we just go on with our day-to-day lives, which are all about life and continuing life, and that's good, life is good, we'll just keep spinning that samsaric wheel again and again. So it's imagination, though, opens something up. It opens prajna up for us. And dreams, literal dreams that you have at night, how the therapists and the wise people will say, okay, all the figures in the dream are actually parts of you. And so I think that's a way to read these tales, too. Like, Gentle Heart, her name is pretty important. The way that she abides by his lust and holds him in that space of lust, right? Doesn't squash it, doesn't satisfy it, holds him still, basically. I was joking, but actually, this is it keeps the lust alive. It is like foreplay in a sense, except that it's just holding him in that space, not pushing it away, not satisfying it. Right? That gentleness, what if that's a quality of the wise and awakened heart? Right? So we come back to tanha, to grasping, to that clinging, sticky desire that keeps the wheel of samsara going. How do we talked about this in the Noble Truth class, but what's the middle path going to be? What's the middle way going to be? It's not going to be the way of the ascetic who just takes to the mountains and tries to escape from desire. And it's not going to be the path of the hedonist or what, the bodhisattva wants when he just wants to have the queen. Just, I want her. It's not going to be either of those. It's also not going to somehow be like the medium between those. Because the medium between those, as I was saying a few weeks ago, the medium between those two things, there will just be the two extremes. You can get more and more abstemious and you still are, flip-flopping between pushing it away, pushing our grasping away, or giving into it. Right? I can narrow what I'm grasping, but I'm still going to be playing that ping pong game between repression and indulgence. But she does something else, which is to abide with him in the midst of the grasping till she reaches a point where she's like, look how you're burning. Look into my eyes, see how you are burning. Right? Does this make sense so that is discipline, right? At its heart, at the heart, that wise and awakened heart, discipline is about not suppressing or indulging. Discipline is about kind of being right in the middle of encountering our own grasping, owning it, facing it. Does that, I mean, I'm saying that, does that even make sense? Did I just like bulldoze you into nodding? Yes, Myobun, that makes sense. I mean, how would that play out in terms of things that we're Has anyone, I think I've talked about this before, but I'm just, I know I've talked about the movement of samsara and the 12-link chain of dependent origination in terms of addiction and the movement of addiction. But I'm wondering if anyone's ever given up something that felt like a really sticky habit that you gotta have it. You gotta have your fix. And one of the ways that this manifests, I think about my own incredible love of cigarettes. Oh my God. Anyone ever? Yeah. Okay. Oh, yeah. Really hard to quit smoking. And one of the things that the teachers teach about it is you've gotta actually start to become mindful of the experience of that craving itself. Right? You gotta actually notice it. You gotta actually linger with it and let that wave of I want rise and crash. You gotta go through it, right? So that you can say, okay, these are my triggers. This is I can tell you tons about when and how I smoked and what that cigarette in that moment, what the cigarette waiting for the bus felt like, what the cigarette waking up in the morning felt like, what the cigarette writing a paper felt like. I can tell you all about those separate cigarette experiences, right? Which then became the gum chewing experiences. And now are just the perfect Myobun experience. No, but I did actually give up chewing gum. I mean, I didn't give it up, but I overcame that intent. My jaw thanks me for having given up that gum chewing. Does that make sense? Like the only way through that intensity is not the willpower that crushes, but it's the gentle heart that abides with, right? So how does that play out actually with something like the calculus being abandoned of coming to a Zen temple to live, or getting out of bed in the morning to go work out, or any of the other things in our lives that we bring discipline to bear?
Well, I'm going back to my library example. Like, there's these kids that have a really hard time being at school, and they come to the library and they throw all the books on the bookshelf on the floor, and they dance on the shelves. Like, it's a different group of kids, and so it's like there's the specialists, the supporters that come and help the kids, and I was thinking of the gentle heart, and they don't stop the kid, they don't hold the kid, they don't yell at them, they just kind of hold them there in that place, and they just sort of, the kid does their thing until it sort of winds down,
Yeah.
And so I'm sitting there watching the library get trashed every day, and I'm like, oh, this is really hard to watch.
Yeah.
Like, why don't they do something?
Yeah.
And so it's like me watching the scene right
Yeah,
here,
yeah.
And it's like,
Yeah, beautiful.
and like, I want it to stop. I want somebody to do something. I want,
Yeah.
and it's just, you gotta just watch. I mean, I'm just like, I just have to keep watching this play out until I don't get triggered anymore.
Right.
That's what I'm
Right. Yeah. There's that kind of just being with it. So Shantideva, who is a 9th century Indian sage, and wrote a book that is very, very important to Tibetan practitioners and Zen Buddhists often don't pay a lot of attention to it. But it's about Shila. It's about practice. It's called the way of the Bodhisattva. The way of the Bodhisattva, and the way Shantideva talks about this is he says he's talking. It's clear that he had anger management issues. I relate to him, but it's the bottom quote. He says, when the urge arises in your mind to feelings of desire or angry hate, do not act, be silent, do not speak, and like a log of wood, be sure to stay. And we'll come back to this quote next week because Kshanti, the paramita of patience, is all about what it, or sometimes it's translated as forbearance, is all about what it means to hold still, like how we do that, how we get to the heart of that stance. I mean, gentle heart here is a freaking amazing model of patience, right? She's like putting up with this, lust-driven monk for, as long as it takes for him to basically build a house. That's a long time. And I'm thinking, what if she's like living in his hut this whole time? Anyway, but that sense of stay put like a log, when that kind of grasping, like pushing away, pulling, these are kind of the same activity. It sort of doesn't matter if we're pushing something away in anger or holding onto it in desire. It's kind of the same stickiness. When that stickiness arises, just don't do anything, right? That not doing anything is the origin of Shila. Like, it's just stop. And in fact, for those, Emma, who are taking the precepts, one of the ways to think about the pure precepts is that they are articulating this movement from, embracing codes and forms, like this stopping, right? And then what comes next? Good dharmas. And then all living beings. So the movement toward a life of the Bodhisattva ideal starts with stop. Just let's create something better than the shell of a notion of separate self. Let's just, in mindfulness teaching, like secular mindfulness, like, MBSR, mindfulness-based stress reduction, we often talk about stop practice. And the word stop is an acronym. So the idea is, when you feel yourself triggered, what do? Stop. The S in stop is like the stupidest acronym ever because the S in stop stands for stop. So stop. Then the T is take a breath. The O sometimes is like observe, but I like to think of it as open because it's, that thing that happens when we take a breath of like opening to the experience of this moment, which in a moment where you're triggered is rage or desire. I mean, it's either anger or greed. It's one of those two poisons. Pick your flavor in the moment. So open, like, there it is. And then the P stands for proceed, which I love because the point here is not to try to change things. The point is actually just to get better and better at staying with, being a gentle heart with our own grasping, with our own greed and hatred. It's not like, let me do something different. No, it's too early for you to try to do something different. Your heart is not fully awakened yet. Let's just stop first. Let's just stop. Right? And then I love, and this I think is something to end with, but I love the way in which we remember ourselves. Like we do when we are held like those kids, when you hold them. Then the cuteness can come out. Then the sweetness can come, the softness can come out. Now, the thing about, and this is the shadow we were talking about before, the thing about form and the way it holds us is that moment, and I think this is actually a super big problem in Zen, so I want to call it out. The way that form, that stopping, that holding, that gentle heart that just keeps us still through the wildness of grasping, which is just life. This is just life moving through us, right? Let's just demystify it. It's not like something crazy, it's just life. The shadow side is that when we're held still and we come to our senses, the experience is more often than not shame, like he feels in the story. Like, holy cow. And that is a shadow side here. That the flip side of this moment of discipline is shame. And I don't know what to do with that exactly, but I think it's important to see, just like the shadow of the kind of perfection of generosity, that shadow might be something like inappropriately sacrificing yourself to things that you really shouldn't, like not taking care of yourself. The shadow side of discipline is shame. And I don't know what to do with that. Other than just to think that, gentle heart loved this monk and saw him as a sage and a holy man, which is why she took care of him. So she did not think he was worthy of shame. But he experienced that remembering of self, that touching into the heart as shameful. I think that's all I have with that. And just something to play with. Does this kind of carry? The Uchayama Roshi quote that is also on the handout, we don't have time to talk about, but it's the place, Emma, the stuff that I said, we'll get to what you talked, but that's a good place to look, to think about how all this ties into whatever vow is, and we might come back to it next week. So again, these paramitas all work together. We've gone from this sort of touching into the softness of our own awakened heart that is at the core of giving and receiving. It's your heart is my heart. To what it means to hold ourselves in the middle of our grasping in discipline. And then Kshanti is going to take up this movement, this circumambulation of the Dharma wheel with the question of, how do we hold steady? And it might be that it gives us a little way out from shame, too. So that's what we'll talk about next week. And I'll make a copy of the passage from the Rafe Martin book, the story on patience, and Bob's your uncle. Or somebody's uncle. Okay. All right, let's close with the Pali refuges. Buddham saranam gacchami, Dhammam saranam gacchami, Sangham saranam gacchami, Dutiyampi Buddham saranam gacchami, Dutiyampi Dhammam saranam gacchami, Dutiyampi Sangham saranam gacchami, Tatiyampi Buddham saranam gacchami, Tatiyampi Dhammam saranam gacchami, Tatyampi Sangam Saranam Gacchami.